care is situational. Care depends upon you. It depends on the other. It depends on the culture. It depends on the family. It depends on the time of day. It's so situational and improvisational. So to be an intelligent caregiver, to make those decisions, to use your intuition and your best judgment, I mean, I think it's hard work. I think it's challenging. And I think that I would probably be the biggest misconception that young kids are easy.
You're listening to Little Big Ideas. We're your hosts, Anne-Marie Coughlin
and Lorrie McGee. Little Big Ideas is brought to you by our sponsor, Storypark.
Storypark puts the child at the heart of childcare management with its all-in-one platform for early childhood education. Hi, Lorrie.
Hi, Anne-Marie. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you. That's what I've been saying a lot. I've been saying nice to see you as much as I can rather than how are you? Because I think how are you is a really tricky question. But here's one for you, because we're talking a lot about care today.
Okay.
So maybe talk to me about how are you caring for yourself these days?
Such a good question. I think we both know that the spring is always a really very busy time for us. And sometimes we, let the busyness take over how we care for ourselves. But I have to say, I stay pretty committed. One of the things that I do to care for myself is, I try to spend time with my boys because that's important for my heart. And I spend a lot of time in my gym and Pilates classes and walking and outside as much as I can. This past weekend was probably one of the first weekends I was able to sit on my balcony because of the weather. It's finally this beautiful weather. And I played cars outside there with Hardin. So, I mean, I think that that's the thing. Hardin is my grandson. So I think one of the, I love the idea of being physically active, but also emotionally engaged with the people around me. You know this about me, but I am a fierce friend and love time with the village of folks that I'm around. So that always fills my heart. I had dinner at a friend's house on Saturday night. I was gone for a walk and I walked over there to get a glass of water and I ended up staying for dinner and lovely conversations with my dear friends Sheila and Ray. So it was a beautiful, beautiful night to sit outside. And that's how I take care of me.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? How do you do that? I know you spend a lot of time in your garden.
I do. I'm an herbalist, as you know, and I'm very connected. Plants are so wise, and I like to pay close attention to them. But I did something that probably wasn't so caring for myself. You know this, but I will announce to the world on the podcast that I probably have the worst teeth on the planet.
You have the absolute, you can't see it outwardly though, I must admit.
Thank God. Seriously. I had more dental surgery on Friday. I had a second root canal on the same tooth. I've had many root canals, so yes, I had another root canal on a tooth that was done a while ago. And because I am such a gardener, I had a little bit of pain medication, and then I went out and I wheelbarrowed 2 yards of mulch around my gardens, which I probably shouldn't have done because I paid for that. So I'm trying to show care for the gardens and take care of them. And I didn't do such a good job on myself. So I was actually down and out all weekend, but the good news is I am starting to perk up and,
good.
And the plants are still going to be there for me
yes, they will.
When I'm ready. They're very kind and patient. That is for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm super excited. You and I both have been talking about having Carol as our guest. So Carol is the author of Illuminating Care, the Pedagogy and Practice of Care through Exchange Press, and published in 2001. She's been working with young children, families, and teachers for many years. When we talked to her, we learned that that we've been in the field about the same length of time, so pretty seasoned in this work. And she has a master's degree in early education and special education and early intervention. She's author of numerous articles and books for early childhood educators. Carol has worked as a preschool and toddler teacher, kindergarten and first grade, inclusion teacher, early interventionist, and director of campus childcare programs. She is currently the director of the Winfenheimer Laboratory School at Vassar College. I hope I got that right, in Poughkeepsie, New York. And I know you and I have had the pleasure of meeting her only virtually. But we've known about her work for a while because we've been studying her practice and her book for the last few years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we did an event together, and she joined us virtually from New York, and we got to get to know her a little bit with some meetings that we did in advance, and she did tell us how grateful she was to meet up with some Canadian educators. And I know she's surrounded with a lot of amazing colleagues herself, but did talk a lot about the different experience right now that's happening, in Canada and the US. And so, we're particularly excited to have this conversation with Carol because we think her book, Illuminating Care, is so critical for this particular time.
Yeah, and such an important book of our times. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, for sure, in early education.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have this conversation. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Carol. Hi. It's great to see you.
You too.
We're super grateful to you for doing this. I think we had talked to you about our motive here. We are interested in meeting up with folks that are doing really important work and interesting things, and creating space to evolve the way we speak and the things that we think about in early childhood, in particular in response to the world that we're living in now, this kind of rapidly changing, confusing, complex world. And, we are so grateful to you for offering the world Illuminating Care.
Thank you.
It has been so spectacular and so influential. Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, it has been, I would have to say, it's been one of the most influential books in certainly in our organization and in our practice for a really long time. And so just the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I know I mentioned to some folks that I work with at Compass that we were going to do this interview and have a conversation with you, and they were so excited.
Oh, that's so great.
Because we study your book all the time. We actually have many groups right now in book studies studying your book right now, and we carry it with us and share it with us in all of the work that we do. Because pedagogy of care is something that is really, really important to us as well as early childhood educators. So we are incredibly grateful.
I am so grateful too. Thank you so much.
So maybe let's start there. Maybe you can share with us, why did you write this book, this important, magical book?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I really knew I was writing a book. And I would say that honestly, some of the stories in that book are 25 years old. So I'm someone who likes to write down things in my journal, and I do write as a reflective practice. I never considered myself a writer, but sometimes I would give myself a challenge of maybe writing 1,000 words or 2,000 or 3,000 words to kind of encapsulize an idea, right? And then I would send it off for see if it could maybe get in a magazine or a journal. I think the first time I did that was I was probably 30 years old. And I wrote an article that got accepted for NAEYC. So I'm 60 now. So that's 40 years ago. And that article
were we.
Oh, yay. So that article was on snack time. And so it just goes to show that's what I've been thinking about all this time. I've been thinking about that. I also feel because I got my master's degree in early education and I was a special ed teacher, I really saw how false teaching children is. And so I had a very some of my experiences where I came from childcare and came from sort of child-centered work environments where I had learned so much from other women. And then I went into a special ed environment and I saw that contrast of like this idea that we have goals for children and we're constructing these ways to teach them that seemed artificial. And so that article was written when I was a special ed teacher, and I just felt like the children are learning the most in care. They're learning. I saw the most language. I saw the most eye contact. I saw the most initiative when we were having snack together, right? So why is it that we aren't trained in those? We are sort of, but in those care rituals. Why is it that those part of the days are considered to be sort of natural? Anyone can do it, so close to us that we don't need to study it, you know? So I found myself like working amongst a lot of wonderful women who had degrees in special education and things, but I was the developmentalist, right? So when they'd say we need to work on these IEP goals, like for example, attention, helping a child develop their attention, and we're going to set them in chairs at circle time, I would be like, no. Kids sit on the floor. Kids sit on the floor for circles and for circle time, and these children need just the same thing every other child needs. And then I did find that there were people. I had been introduced to, I think, Tony Linder, transdisciplinary play-based assessment, and Diane Bricker, who was out at the University of Oregon. She was a special ed teacher who was talking more about sort of doing environmental assessments and looking at how children move through the day and how many naturally occurring opportunities we have to support their learning, that we don't have to contrive it. And she was one of these people who talked about hand washing and snack time and, you know, all the rituals of care that complemented everything we knew from Magda Gerber and all the responsive care people.
I love that you talk about it as rituals of care. And I think often we think about them as transitions in our work, is something that we get through to get to something else, to get to circle, to get to. And I think that's been such a script that we've been carrying in our work as early childhood educators. And I think that's one of the things that's been one of the gifts of your book, is to look at not these as something we get through, but actually thinking about them as rituals of care. And that these are the really important learning opportunities. I'm curious, did your understanding of brain development really impact your thinking around those moments as well, those kind of serve and return moments that happen in those rituals of care?
Yeah, I think that everything, you learn about brain development and child development, for me, it reinforced what I felt was instinctual, right? Like when the brain research says that babies are seeking relationships, that babies recognize voice, respond to voice more than recorded word. When the brain research describes this kind of circular, reciprocal engagement that is most powerful in shaping children's minds, I think that's wonderful. But I always felt like, wow, it's reinforcing what we know. It's like, we know that, right? But it is great to have that reinforcement. And I think, sometimes here in the United States, there, in the 90s, there was all this sort of 0 to 3 movement, and brain development was a big part of that talk. And we would actually see images of children hooked up to electrodes, and I would be like, I like the image of the the adult and the child looking at each other. I like the image of the diaper change, the image of the lifting the child up with your hands. Those images to me speak to brain development more honestly. I know that we're always kind of bridging these two worlds where we want the stakeholders to understand the importance of our work. So to me, that's always a push and a pull.
It is always a push and a pull.
What I found myself thinking too is that in your book, and we also have been studying it in our large organization, you have been able to give language to things that we know in our bones. So, you referenced that idea of like, yes, we already knew that. But I think the way that you've put it together, it is very accessible and very real. And when you read it, it's like, yes, I knew that. It validates too, right? What we believe. But I think too, as early educators in today's world, we get a lot of mixed messages. I think we're of a vintage where we've seen a lot, and maybe we have a different level of confidence. But I think for new folks, when they're coming in, they're just being bombarded with all kinds of things, and they're trying to do a good job, right? They're trying to show up, but it's sometimes hard to navigate. And some of it goes against the feeling that you carry in your bones, right? Which is, again, why your book is so important. But I wonder, how has your ideas, or maybe they haven't, how have they, your ideas about care changed for you over the years?
Yeah, I think that I was surprised at how much there was to learn about care. I was surprised that there was a whole field of study. I was amazed to find people like Nell Noddings and why didn't I learn about her in grad school? Why was that not part of the study? And I think that there is this, so for me, the kind of things like there is good care ethicists talk about good care. They talk about care that is uncaring. All these things that I was trying to write about, but couldn't figure out how to say it. It's like, oh, someone has said this. There is care that is uncaring, that, these ideas about the vulnerable. I love that language because I used to really follow Ron Lally when he was alive. And he talked about that vulnerable, competent child. And I loved that language. But then to hear the care ethicists talking about dependency labor and the vulnerable child and how our ethics have to be higher. The more vulnerable, the higher our ethics need to be, right? That kind of stuff gave me goosebumps because it was stuff that I kind of had grappled with, didn't quite know how to say or didn't quite understand. The ideas around the other, that philosophers have talked for many years about this false independence. We don't really become ourselves. We really don't develop our identity unless we have another. So this belief that we are each other, although we love our independence and our autonomy and our separateness, that we are each other and that we can't develop without the gaze of the other. Those kind of things, just to think that people have studied that ethical encounter that we call care for so many years, and that is still kind of hard to find that community of people who understand the depth.
It was one of the things that struck me in your, when I listened to your keynote when we were together, was the amount of science behind the art of care. And that idea that you brought forward, so much of that. And you have a quote, and I'm probably not going to get it correct, but the idea that care is an art and science and an honorable profession, and not everyone can care, and I think that a lot of times, folks move into the early childhood field often because, they're caring people. But there is a skill in care and a deep understanding. in that. Is that, is that one of the reasons why you brought this book to the world, was to bring those ideas forward too?
Yes, I do think that's true, that there is an art and a science. I think that was important for me to say. And I just remember also trying to figure out how to say that. I remember going to a conference in AEYC, a state, where I taught a course. I taught a class called the Pedagogy of Care, and I only had like 5 people show up. And I was really trying to get people to think about how they learn to care, because I was trying to get at this idea of how we develop our care competencies and how we can become better at caring. But the conversation kind of fell flat. A lot of people wanted to say, I'm caring because my mom was caring, or I'm caring because my mom wasn't caring. But I didn't know how to take it further, right? To say that all those experiences, we all have been cared for. And I didn't know how to say that sometimes it is an uncaring, because we have to be fed and bathed in order to live and into adulthood. So we all have been cared for. I also didn't know how to say that we could learn to care, that we could get better at caring. And then I started to think about sort of the way I had done that when I wrote that snack article, that I had seen my colleague Anne just be so skilled, and she was a Montessori trained educator, and the way she prepared snack for her toddlers. And I felt like, I need to organize these snack materials. I need to think about like how I'm going to get these kids to the table, and how I'm going to create a climate of care while we're eating, and a conversation. And I grew, right? I grew my care practice by talking to her and thinking about that. And then also by looking into the research and finding theorists. I worked with a speech therapist who was also a feeding specialist, and she told me about Ellen Satter. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole book on our attitudes towards food, and how we can make meals joyful, and how it isn't healthy. Research says it isn't healthy to bribe children to take a bite. So that was like, once you look for those specialists, so then you're stretching yourself. So then it's like, yes, I did learn to care for my mom, but there's this deeper practice around those rituals that I can grow, that is different than the way that I was raised. And I'm reaching to the science and to the specialists to help me understand how I would do this in a group care situation, and how that would be from parenting or relying on my sort of ancient wisdom that has been passed on to me. There is that into. So I think it's both. I think that I also swung to the other side. Like, this is a science, we can learn this, and it's not an art. And I think that is both, because I think that we are instinctual. We do have caring tendencies, and some of us perhaps have more caring tendencies. So there is a part of it that is natural, or otherwise our babies would never make it. We have to love babies in order for them to survive. So there's a part of it that's natural, and then there's another part of it that can be learned and improved and grown.
I'm also really interested in the social attitudes that come with the caregiver. It feels sometimes like there's assumptions out there that, there are people that will just show up, and there are people that will take care of, others. And I think that that's kind of evidenced through when you look at caregiving professions. They're usually not the highest paid professions. They work long hours, and there's some assumptions that they're going to do it because I think it's like artists get that too. This is something important in their life, and they're just going to do it. And I think what you're offering is a different kind of conversation that is really needed right now, that it is something that not everybody does well. I think we can all show up to it because in a way, because we are so interdependent, as a species, then there are some natural things that we do for each other for our own survival. But the kind of care that we're talking about, and I think what the science can do, and it has been doing, is really help us to understand the potential that exists when we are cared for, when we're cared about. Yeah.
I think it grows deeper, when you have that, when you can really tap into that experience. Like if you have been hospitalized and you can really tap into the difference between the nurse who was caring and the one who was not caring, and what a difference, or maybe your parents are aging, or whatever experience you have around people who you need to support your life. Mm-hmm. When your heart is so vulnerable and tender, if your parent is aging, or your child is hospitalized, or you're in labor and someone is helping you have a baby, all these times in life that we need some expertise around us. What a difference when people do that science with care. Right. And if you think about the word care, nursing rejected the word for many years because nursing care seems very womanly and very sentimental, so it was like nursing science. We wanted to really claim the science of nursing. And, when you look at human rights activists, especially disability rights, they rejected the word care because they felt it was parental, and they wanted to be seen as whole adults who needed assistance, not care. And so we still reject the word care a lot, I think, in our society because of those associations that you're trying to baby me, or you're coddling me, or you're spoiling me, or it's sentimental, it's something nice women do, it's not serious, or because care has been abused, right? That we have hired domestic servants to care for the most important things in our life, which are our babies, our children, nannies, so it's like those things that are most important, whether someone's cleaning your house, caring for your child, caring for your elder, those things that are the closest to you, that are domestic, that are womanly, I guess you would say. People reject the word because of all those associations and the fear of not being seen, not being understood, not being taken seriously. So I'm always grappling with that, because in our field, we are at another big push right now in our country not to say care, to say early educator. And I understand that. And I use the word educator throughout my book because I've always identified as an educator of young children. But I think saying don't talk about care, don't use the word care, call it something else, call it relational, call it social emotional skills, call it these other things, is where I have a problem, because I don't think there's anything that can really quite describe that ethical encounter, and the kind of work that we do, and the amount of time that we spend caring, that makes our work so unique because of the vulnerable working with.
Yeah, and if I think about the world that we're in right now, I feel like, as you're speaking, I'm also thinking about, yes, there's scientists, and there's all kinds of brilliant people that have helped us to understand. And we also have Indigenous knowledges that are being shared more and more in a really, generous way, that is helping us to understand the importance of care, and not just care for each other and care for community, which we really need, but also care for land and care for this planet that does such a good job to care for us, right? And that we've had such an impact on. So if I was to pick a word for this time in human history, I can't think of a better one.
I think that's such a good point. I'm just reading the care ethicist Maurice Hamilton, and he was saying, yes, Carol Gilligan gave us that word, care ethics, and she struggled with women's ethics, feminist ethics, care ethics, relational ethics, but she had by no means claimed to invent this idea of studying care and thinking about relational ways of being. There were many women in Latin America who were writing about this relational way of being in the world. And then he always points out those indigenous cultures who really built their societies around that network of care, right? So we're in this period of contrast because of the patriarchy and the capitalism and the world we're living in now. But Carol Gilligan saying care ethics in the 70s and 80s was by no means a new way of being.
It makes me also think Peter Moss, he wrote a book called Beyond Quality. And one of the things he talks about in there is the pressure that early childhood educators feel to be like education. Because there's this idea that formal education is more important than care. And he talks about this notion of care is not subordinate to education, that care is education. And I know that is a big message as well that you share in your book. And I'm curious, I remember when you spoke at one point, you talked about this idea of thinking about a hierarchy in our day and where that comes from. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think because we have to find ways to talk, we put things in categories and hierarchies, right? And I think that, even like if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, right, you see that the physiological needs are at the bottom and that the self-actualization is at the top. And I don't think Maslow intended that to be a pyramid like that. I think that was another psychologist who put it in that pyramid and interpreted it that way. And we could say, well, that's the foundation. That's the most important thing. But somehow when people look at that, they think that we're always on our way someplace, right? The child is not quite yet self-actualized because they're needy. The child is needy. So why should neediness be a weakness or something lower, subordinate, right? So I think about those hierarchies to say, let's take things out of the hierarchy and make a net or make a circle or a full ring, because the child is whole. The child can be self-actualized. Food can be love, right? The elder can be whole, even though no one's over the hill. Each stage of life offers challenge and intelligence, a special intelligence. Babies, toddlers have a special intelligence. There's not this pre-something, pre-human, pre-adult, right? This adulthood isn't the ultimate pinnacle. And I think that another way to think about hierarchies is the way we structure our days. Like you said before, like the transitions, do we need to get done with cubby time and getting our coats hung up quickly so we can get to circle time where the learning happens? Like, are we creating our own hierarchies in terms of the way we plan the day? And we have so much pressure that we certainly do. The things that find their way on the lesson plan are usually the circle time and the art experiences and the pre-math and those other kinds of wonderful structures that hold the day aren't really usually on the lesson. And those are the things that are giving the day the possibility for the story time to be meaningful, because the structure comes from care, right? Because children have to eat every 3 hours, because they need to rest and they modulate between active play and quiet play. All those care rituals are what give the day rhythm and structure, but those in our mind fall to the bottom of the hierarchy. They're not the goal, this whole idea of outcome-based education. We don't think about care when we talk about outcome-based education, and when we have to prove what we're doing. And I think I'm really trying to think about how we report out about care. We were doing more learning stories in our school, so rather than always write about the blocks and the puzzles and let's all write about the care. Let's write about those transitions when the mom drops. And let's write about what happened, the conversation the kids had at snack time, or the song that you sang when they were, transitioning to rest. Let's talk about those times of the day too, to help elevate them and illuminate them for families.
I think we also carry this conditioning, right? We carry these stories about what's important and what's not important. And they get reinforced, often by where we're working and how we're working and the busyness and the messiness of the day. Right. And I think, when you have books like yours that help to slow us down and think about what's happening, challenge some of those practices a little bit, and be more relational, in our work. One of the things, and Lorrie knows this story, one of the things that I always think I giggle at is when we work in classrooms, especially in the beginning of the new year, when new children come in September, and the educators say, well, we're getting to know the children. Like when we say what's happening, we're getting to know the children. And I always like to say, well, when will you know them? Is it at the end of September you'll know them, or does it take 2 months to get to know them? And they're like, we carry this idea, and when we laugh a little bit about it and talk about it, what we have come to realize is that we're not really trying to get to know the children. We're trying to get the children to know the expectations and the routine of the classroom. And those are two really different things. And so when we're invited to pause and stop and think about what does it actually mean to get to know someone, it asks something so different from us. And it means we have to move differently, in our encounters. And just even, that notion that can we ever really know someone fully? I don't know that we can, but the process, the act of, being in relation and letting it unfold is such an honorable one. But I don't know that we have enough of those stories, which is why, we get so excited about books like yours that invite us to think in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no question there. That was just a big old statement.
That's great. That's great. I also wanted because you said Peter Moss, I wanted just to, he has a new book called Early Childhood in the Anglosphere, and it's available free, and it's there's a PDF if you search it. I think, and
that's great information. Thank you.
Yes. So he is talking about calling ourselves early childhood educators. And every time he says that, he makes a qualification about it. It doesn't mean we're leaving out care. It means we need more care. So he has a really, great way of talking about why we're calling ourselves educators and how we need to keep reconceptualizing and legitimizing care in the field.
I love that.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the name of it?
I'm trying to remember. It's Early Childhood in the Anglosphere.
The Anglosphere. Okay.
I think one of the things is like, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about care in early education from your experience?
It's a hard question, but I think again about Ron Lally, who had a huge influence on me. And he said something like, early childhood educators have more opportunity to influence a person's life than college professors. And I think he said baby and toddler teachers, actually. And I think this notion that the younger the person, the easier the work, that would probably be the biggest misconception, right?
Yeah,
so
I love that.
It's harder and more real somehow when you're teaching college. But the younger you go, the less of a teacher you are, the less skill. I just think about all the grappling we do when we are caring for children, about all the decisions we make, all the lack of, care is situational. Care depends upon you. It depends on the other. It depends on the culture. It depends on the family. It depends on the time of day. It's so situational and improvisational. So to be an intelligent caregiver, to make those decisions, to use your intuition and your best judgment, I think it's hard work. I think it's challenging. And I think that would probably be the biggest misconception, that young kids are easy.
You're so right when you say that. So often we're taught that you have this bag of tricks, and that you draw on these tools when something happens, and we know that that might be from a very high general way of thinking about it. That's an idea you can think with, but how do I respond with these children in this classroom, in this moment, on this day, with the mood that I'm in and the situation that they're in and the weather outside? And there's just so many contributing factors that I think comparing it to improv is such. I know there's been a lot of work done with improv in early childhood, because we are kind of making it up as we go along.
Right. We have, I mean, kids teach us so much, like an individual child who is incredibly challenging for whatever reason. I always feel like they're teaching me so much, and I will come back to that another time, right? Like you think, oh, this child reminds me of that one. Remember that one? Remember how we tried this and that? And remember how we thought that showing her the photo of her mama would help calm her down, but all it did was send her into a rage every time, and we had to find another strategy. And so it's like, they teach us so much, but it's just, it is a dynamic work.
You said it earlier. It's like, it's really intellectual work. Like it is really. And we had a previous guest on, Deb Curtis. I'm sure you know of her work. She's a dear friend and mentor of ours. And she talks about working with toddlers as both the most emotionally and intellectually engaging work. And I think it's just, we don't give the credibility to our youngest citizens and opportunities to work alongside them. I even notice, we even talk about, stories and documentation. And people talk about it's so much harder to offer documentation with infants and toddlers because they're not verbal. And yet they communicate all the time. They're like in a constant state of communication and research. So it's fascinating. I really appreciate that idea that is one of the misunderstood things about our field and about care.
And also that we are intellectually engaged and the child is intellectually engaged when they're in that care range. So that so care is education. The child is thinking, the child is perspective taking, the child is imagining. The care rituals engage the brain in that way. And so I think that would be the biggest misconception, is that we can separate the body. There can be a place where you care for kids that's just custodial. That just doesn't exist, because even if it's poor care and whatever you want to call bad care and custodial care, the child's brain is still engaged and learning something. Might not be the lesson we want them to learn, but absolutely cannot say that this is the time of day when we care and this is the time of day that we learn. It's just impossible.
Yeah. I think that happens so much with so many different things in our field. We, in Ontario, where we are, we have a provincial pedagogy that focuses on the ideas of belonging, engagement, expression, and well-being. And can't tell you how many times we've seen and heard about people who are trying to separate those things and do a lesson or an experience in belonging. Or a lesson or experience in expression. And it's the same thing. I mean, they're woven in with each other. You don't get well-being without belonging, and if you belong, you're able to express yourself freely, and you're engaged.
I think that's like one of the really essential things about early childhood too, is that whole body, whole mind, whole heart integration, because you could separate it out. Like if you're studying chemistry in college, right? You supposedly, I mean, I know you're still a whole body, you're still a whole person, but I think, that integration, body, mind, it's so clear when the baby's reaching for the toy, how their brain is working and how their body and mind and intention and thinking is so integrated. And I think that part of understanding human development at the beginning of life is so linked to our understanding of care. And I think with that understanding, we want to reject that image of the child as the scholar, Because I think that people that don't understand early learning love to see the child learning in a way that isn't really that authentic and engaging for the child. So, if you don't understand child development and you're just feeling so excited because, I don't know, because the baby's looking at a book, I mean, that's cool. Books are great. We always want to look at books. But that image of the baby looking at a book holds more value to you because you're thinking education is scholarship. It's an idea we have about what education is instead of the development of the human at the beginning of life, which is intellectual work, which is going to lead to the child who can think and read and write and all those things. Of course, I'm not rejecting any of that it's that academic stuff, but I just think the image that looks so different for our little ones.
And again, those are those narratives that we have carried. Something that we think a lot about, because Lorrie and I do a lot of our work is the work with the big people who are caring for the little people, right? And we see so many parallels. That this is humans stuff, and it's, if we haven't been cared for, it's hard for us to care for others. But in your view, Carol, what do you think educators need in this moment to feel cared for at this particular time in human history?
I think it goes back to, what you were saying about belonging, right? And well-being and all that being connected. I think your own self-image, your own self-concept. I know Deb Curtis talks a lot about self-concept of the educator. I remember reading and using her articles when I was a new director. Like, how do you see yourself? So I think they need that sort of inside out affirmation. I guess from the outside, they also need permission to slow down so that they can care.
Absolutely. Yes.
I remember like a teacher telling me once that I just came in and picked up a child, like she was having a hard day and she was frustrated. And I just came in and picked a little boy up and she's like, oh gosh, he's 3. I got to remember he's 3. Like I didn't say anything. Right. And so they need leaders around them that are modeling care in real ways.
What gives you hope? What gives you hope right now, Carol?
I think it's really the golden age of care ethics. And I'm kind of gotten obsessed about collecting all the books on care ethics right now. And there's so many good ones and so many people talking about our interdependence, like you said, environmentalist, how we can apply our advocacy for children to our relationship with the earth, this whole idea that the personal is political. I know that's hard right now. But the way that the systems that are in place that allow us to care for one another are the very most intimate kind of care is a political situation, right? We have to have systems in place. So I think, although, there's a lot to be worried about right now, I do think that there is a growing understanding of our interdependence. I think there is a brokenheartedness right now, and it's, the environmentalists feel it, and a lot of educators feel it, and a lot of the activists around the world feel that brokenheartedness. But within that, touching into that, I'm hopeful that we won't feel despair, but we'll feel our passion and our conviction and recognize that loving each other, loving kids, loving the planet contains elements of grief and brokenheartedness. But sometimes when things get tough is when we find what we really believe in. And I feel hopeful. That more and more people are tapping into that heart of advocacy feeling what they believe, what they can stand.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things we wrote in our book is that we do believe that educators have an ethical responsibility to be armored in hope or a sense of hopefulness, because we are, working with a whole new generation of human beings who are growing up in this world. And, we need to see that it can be something valuable and important to them. What do you do, Carol, to care for yourself?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I do all the domestic things like cooking and gardening and taking walks and with my dog and just connecting, having conversations with colleagues that I care about. I think that might be the most important thing for educators too, right? To have a colleague, to have a collegial friend that understands the work.
Understands the work. It's interesting. We've been meeting with a lot of our folks where I'm at London Bridge, and 75% of our organization is new in the last few years. And so it's like a whole new rebuilding. And so we found that a lot of people have carried the notion that if you've been here a long time, I should just do what you do. And, that can be really helpful, but it can also be not so great. And so, we've been trying to invite people to be very careful and select wisely, select who you follow wisely. And not to just do what they do, but understand why they do it. And does that why resonate with your why? So when we can, because I do think we're also that trained, everything moves so quickly, and it's like, we just have to go through the motions, and we want to do a good job. So we take on the narrative that this is the right thing and it's worked for this person. And so I'm glad to hear that, that you are taking care of yourself, because I know as the caregiver
and finding hope. Yeah.
Sometimes we're not all that good at that. So that's.
Well, we have to just say a huge thank you, Carol, for this conversation and for joining us. We were really hopeful when we reached out that we would be able to find this time and be able to be together like this. And I think you've given so much to the world of early childhood, and we're super grateful that you've been here. Thank you.
So grateful. I'm beyond grateful that you found the book, and thanks for the work you're doing.
We're so fortunate to be able to have Carol and have this conversation. And I know we said this, but her book has just had such a big impact on our work here, certainly in Ontario and Canada, and within our own organizations for sure.
Yeah, she's extraordinarily thoughtful. She's such a delightful person to have a conversation with too. And you can see and feel the seriousness in which she takes this idea of care. And I, in particular, we're trying to have this conversation about what the world needs right now and how we might think differently about education in the 21st century. And it seems a little ironic because I feel like, certainly care and ideas of care are well known in ancient civilizations, but she is able to bring a palpableness to it that helps us to reclaim it as a profession. And I think that's so cool. And I know we kind of ended the podcast, and then she shared with us that she was so busy during the day because she was dealing with head lice. And it's like, it's just a reminder.
It's just a reminder of the reality. Exactly.
That's real.
Yeah. The other thing that I so appreciate is her depth of research around this idea of care. And looking to folks outside of early education. And I think so often we really need to remind ourselves that there's so much happening in the world that outside of early childhood that can inform and support us in our work and give, I think, an appreciation for early education as, an honorable profession, as she talks about.
Just a beautiful marrying of the stuff that we know in our heart, the stuff we feel in our bones, and then what science and research is telling us, and
affirming our hearts, and right, affirming that for us.
Yeah. So I think that idea of reclaiming love, reclaiming care. I've always said I think we should be calling ourselves professional lovers.
I know we should. You always say because it's legal and we get paid for it, which is always an interesting way to think about it. So
that's right. So that was really great. So we want to again thank Storypark for enabling this to happen for us. They're a great partner to take this ride on. And if you want to check them out, just visit their site on storypark.com.
You've been listening to Little Big Ideas,
a podcast brought to you by your hosts, Anne-Marie Coughlin and Lorrie McGee, with the help of our friends at Storypark.